Hi Brian, this is Gavin Kaywood from National Centre for Product Design and Development Research in Cardiff in Wales in the UK. In this building I'm in we have about 35 people undertaking activities that range from doctorate level research to consultancy in industrial design, prototyping using the latest product design prototyping technologies, as well as a workshop which can help, in theory, take products from an idea through prototyping and through to sort of manufacture, or at least batch manufacture at the start. But alongside those, for the last 15 or so years, we've been undertaking knowledge transfer activities where we can take our expertise here in design and work with the regional government to run programs to promote and support businesses, particularly in how they understand and use design. And in doing that, we've been leading a number of networks over the last sort of 7 or 8 years with design organisations across Europe. First of all, to understand what models they've got in their nations to support and promote design, and more recently to look at how design can play a role in realising regional and national innovation policies. And maybe I'll come on to that in a minute. But you've asked me 3 questions, so I'll try and answer those questions for you. First question you had was, would you think that having a design policy or design policies in a developing country such as the Philippines help in national development? If yes, how? First answer is, simple answer is no. I think that a distinct design policy might be a distraction. And a lot of nations struggle with this, and there aren't many nations around the world that have got their own distinct design policy. But where they have, quite often, it can come across as quite isolating, or quite isolated, and have its own kind of life with its own stakeholders and not really be integrated. A much better model, and a model which more nations are finding successful and buying into, is where design is integrated into other policies, whether those are policies for economic development, social development, or public services, etc. So it's working out what model is best for you. And taking one step back, design is a very strange subject. It's one of those topics or a word which people understand in very different ways. It is such a broad you can find such a broad definition of what design means to every different person, and it means something different to everyone. So I think a job you've got is to understand what you mean by design, and I don't mean that in any kind of patronising way, but I mean you need to put it in terms that your policymakers and your industry and your public services can understand and appreciate. And a simple way of doing that is by using case studies and examples about how design has played a role. For example, I'll give you a very quick example. I won't describe what the product is in detail, but this is a medical product which tests the allergies in people's blood. So you take a drop of their blood and you put it on this part of the device, and you'll get a little band depending on what you might be allergic to. Design played a role in this, in that a doctor came up with the idea of this innovation, and he spent 2 years and about £70,000 being supported by about £70,000 by the regional government to develop the concept to make it work in the laboratory. At the end of those 2 years, he had a functioning kind of process which could test people's blood, but he had no idea about how to turn that into a product which could be manufactured, could be used easily, could be packaged, branded and distributed, and then disposed of. He had no idea how to turn it into a commercial and viable product, in essence. So design played a role in this product in being the bridge between the technical innovation, the scientific innovation, and the marketplace. And it can go backwards and forwards, so it should have been the design should have been taking some leads on how the product might have been used from the marketplace while it was being developed, but ultimately it enabled him to create a business around a technical innovation and enable it to be actually manufactured, produced, and become commercially viable. And I can run through similar stories. This is an example of a sort of a food packaging product, where previously this is a high-value product. It's simply flour, but it's handmade, organic, an artisan product. And this product sells for 10 times the amount you can buy the cheapest flour in the supermarket for. And in order to reach the market and be distributed, now it's distributed internationally, they had to realise what their brand values were and how to get those into the packaging sort of on the shelf. And with relatively low investment, they've managed to do that. And they've found a marketplace, found much wider distribution, and it's become a success. And the flour mill waste is produced has now reached capacity. They've sort of tripled their production and had a major success. And like most things, most things in design, it's not rocket science, it's not complicated, but it's just getting companies to realise the potential, take a step back, and to use the relevant expertise. But those kind of simple stories are amazing in convincing particularly policymakers and politicians about the power of design. So going back to the answer to your first question, do I think you need a design policy? I don't know exactly what you need, but it's probably more viable, more sustainable over long term if you think about not having a distinct design policy but integrating it into other policies. That's our view anyway, from what we found from our experience in working with other nations and how they're doing it. The second question was, what are the special concerns in design policy initiatives and formation that may be specific to developing countries? I think every nation you look at around the world, most nations, including developing nations, and we've worked with a number of countries in Africa who they've all got probably an economic development policy, and in pretty much all of them, innovation will be on page 1. If it's not on page 1, it'll be on page 2. And about how they want to use innovation to find a place in the marketplace, in the international marketplace. Design can play a significant role in that, as in going back to what I was saying about in the first question, it is this bridge between innovation in concept and innovation in reality, I guess. And that might be in terms of product, it might be in terms of a service, it might be in terms of the private sector or the public sector, and it might be in terms of social innovation. And all of those things are being addressed really, particularly in European nations and with the European Commission. They've realised with their most recent policies that design has got a role to play in that those much more broader disciplines of design. And so, you describe yourselves as a developing nation, and I think you should think about design in these broader terms too, and not just focus particularly on the sort of manufacturing side of what design can bring for product development, but be at the leading edge with the other sort of nations, particularly Europe, who are looking at design in terms of manufacturing to realise product innovation. In private sector services, using service design, and the leading multinationals around the world are starting to use service design to make sure that their services are sustainable and profitable. In public sector services, I mean, around the world, everyone is with the sort of economic crunch. People are trying to save money and looking for alternative models for how public service delivery might happen. And design is one of those things which can help to help you be more effective and efficient in doing that. And even though it's included in sort of European policy at the moment, many of the nations and regions are struggling to actually realise how to do it. But with the new situation, the global economic environment, people are being more prepared to actually look at it. So from a perspective of, as you describe yourself as a developing nation, I would say make sure you try and look at design on a broader context. And I think it has definitely got a role to play. And the third question you have is, what advice can you give to the different representatives from the design industries, academia, government trade offices and business present in your forum regarding design policy work, and regarding design as a tool for national development and as a provider for sustainable strategic advantage for a country? That's quite a long question. What we've learned from working with other nations, particularly in Europe, is that one model for design support, it's very difficult to transfer that into another nation, into a different environment, because every nation and even region of a nation has got a different environment. It's got a different social, cultural, economic and political environment. So what works in one area will not necessarily work in another area. So in effect, you've got to define what your needs are in order to make it work and happen in your region and nation. So if you convince your politicians to develop a policy for design promotion, if you then go ahead and promote design to industry, and you raise expectation about what design can bring, you've got to make sure you can fulfill that demand. And if you've got to make sure, in order to fulfill that demand, you've got to make sure you've got a design industry which can achieve the results from the expectations you've raised. There's got to be a balance that's got to be struck. So if you do raise expectation, you've got to be able to realise that demand. So in effect, I think a starting point might be actually mapping out what kind of design infrastructure you've got at the moment, and align that potentially, looking at what kind of programs and policies you've got at the moment for innovation, and look at where design might fit into that. And from that, then start to make a plan. But a key thing, I guess I'm coming on to a key thing is that we found is that nothing changes without a change in policy. Yeah, and you can only change policy if you convince politicians. So a job to be done is to convince politicians, usually with relatively simple stories like the ones I've told, to do with product or examples with public services, etc., to convince them about the power and potential of design and what it can bring in whatever environment. And from that, they can hopefully integrate design into their policies for economic and social development. And from that will cascade out programs which can help to develop the capabilities and capacity for design in the region or nation, and also promote it to the public and private sector. So I guess in conclusion, I would, first of all, if you're starting out and looking at design policy and programs and support and promotion, look around the world at what's going on, because there is a lot going on. When we started this activity probably about 10 years ago, I think there were about 80 nations who had design promotional support programs going on, and that's increasing all the time. More and more regions and nations are buying into the design message and how design can help to realise innovation. So look around at what's going on. There is a lot going on, and you can find more information. We hold one of the large, I think probably the largest library of case studies about design, promotion and support and policy in the world, and you can find that by going to www.cproject.org, and it's all available for free to have a look at. That's built from a European Commission funded project. So have a look around the world, not to copy what's going on, but to learn some of the lessons and be a little bit smart about what you look at. A problem with a lot of design programs is they don't have effective measurement. So government might run a program, the program runs for a certain period, comes to an end, they've met their sort of targets for delivery of those activities, and then there's no proper measurement afterwards. So if you're looking at a program and want to be convinced about its impact, then make sure there's some kind of proper measurement been done afterwards, and that is what is most convincing to sort of politicians. And the second point would be to be brave. I mean, I've talked about it already, but making sure you don't simply focus on design in terms of product innovation. Make sure you think about it in terms of quite a broad aspect. So product, service, private sector, public sector, and potentially social innovation too. Design can bring an awful lot to that. And for regions and nations, I mean, like our own, we think that we can find a significant advantage if we can be ahead of the game slightly on making sure design happens in that broader church. And the final thing is, remember that nothing changes without changes in policy. So you need to convince your politicians to make things happen. Okay, I hope that gave you some kind of insight to what we're up to and what the experiences we've had in working design policy and support. Hope to speak to you again. Thank you. Bye.